Okay, Chapter 3, Part 3, we're starting on page 44, Interdisciplinary Education. As described in the prelude, eco-literate music pedagogy involves cultivating ecological consciousness in local places and connecting local understandings to global ecological crises. In other words, cultivating a love of place and recognition of the ecological crises are the means and ends of eco-literate music pedagogy. Cultivating ecological literacy in music educational institutions seems to be an interdisciplinary task, and many eco-literacy frameworks are employed in the fields of environmental education, ecology, and the humanities. Interdisciplinary education has been defined as, quote, a connecting distinct disciplinary concepts and facets of inquiry to create a common understanding of a complex issue, question, or problem, end quote, as Juncker and Bracken. The term interdisciplinary and integration are often conflated. Previously, I pointed to Leora Bressler's arts integration styles as a starting point for considering interdisciplinary education for ecological literacy. Currently, I see Julie Thompson-Klein and Janet Barrett's conception of interdisciplinarity as particularly appropriate. In the U.S. and elsewhere, interdisciplinarity is frequently valued in general education. Interdisciplinarity is, to quote Klein, rooted in the ideas of unity and synthesis, evoking a common epistemology of convergence, end quote. In eco-literate music pedagogy, interdisciplinarity emerges as a social demand, that is, particular needs of new subjects which cannot, by definition, be contained within a single disciplinary frame, such as environmental research. Eco-literate music pedagogy is interdisciplinary in part because the unnatural separation of disciplines has often caused music educators to focus on sonic aspects of music, forgetting the social and ecological inspirations connected to musicking. See Bates 2016. However, quoting Janet Barrett, quote, a truly comprehensive music program is already interdisciplinary in nature because musical understanding draws upon many forms of knowing and understanding, end quote. Interdisciplinarity emerges as a liberal process of connective thinking, and in music education can involve interdisciplinary, intradisciplinary, and student-centered emancipatory practices. In Barrett's model, interdisciplinary refers to connections made between various intradisciplinary refers to connections made between various musical genres and styles. An example of intradisciplinary eco-literate music pedagogy might involve guiding students to understanding musical eco-activism by comparing and contrasting Hunter Hensley's Requiem for the Mountains, Mike Townsend's They Call It Progress, and will.i.am's SOS. Interdisciplinary refers to connections made between closely related disciplines. In this case, students might research ecological content, science, write poetry, writing, and compose melodies, music, composing their own eco-activism songs. Of course, songwriting is an interdisciplinary activity where songwriters research, write, and music all at once. This follows the theory found, for instance, in Deweyan educational theory, that there is an underlying unity to interdisciplinary work. In the student-centered emancipatory model, students make connections between music and their own experiences. In student-centered eco-literate music pedagogy, students could be assigned homework to ask their community elders to teach them songs about the environment, which they would then share in class. Interdisciplinary education often locates its foundation in John Dewey's educational philosophy. Dewey taught, quote, there cannot be two sets of ethical principles, one for life in the school and the other for life outside of the school, end quote. Pragmatically speaking, we all live interdisciplinary, integrated, connected, complementary lives. Quote from Bassnett, interdisciplinarity and interactivity are not just buzzwords, they are fundamental concepts that underpin how students think, how they learn, and how they will determine their futures, end quote. All citizens of modern democracies must understand complex issues emerging from many disciplines, including the ecological crises. And yet, in schools, too often, the disciplines are conceived as strictly separate. Quote from Barrett, although educational institutions segment knowledge into separate packages called subjects, deep understanding often depends upon the intersections and interactions of these disciplines, end quote. The principle of complementarity suggests the interplay of ideas between among disciplines that fold over to strengthen bonds and deepen understandings. Eco-literate music pedagogy requires such interplay between music, environmental science, and other disciplines. How might music teachers enacting eco-literate music pedagogy choose repertoire? We can begin to answer this question by looking to Barrett's interdisciplinarity. Barrett recommends we consider music interdisciplinary quotient, IQ, quote, potential to lead fluidly to the study of closely related works, art forms, and eras, end quote. High IQ music might be selected for various reasons in eco-literate music pedagogy. Students might sing David Mallett's garden song while growing food in class, learning how to care for soil and reflecting on the ecological cost of shipping food around the world. Or the teacher might introduce Beethoven's Pastoral Symphony and challenge students to find parallels between Beethoven's work and gender metaphors such as delicateness and purity. Or in Beethoven's words, quote, the trees and the rocks give man the resonance he needs, end quote. And following the insight of ecofeminists such as Karen Warren, this conversation can lead to critical consciousness of the similarities between unjustified historical domination by men of both women and nature. Interdisciplinarity is used as a model for research in music education, but seldom includes ecological issues outright. Music education researchers Betty Ann Yonker and Gillian Bracken shared an example of interdisciplinary education through birdsong, ecology, and music. The purpose of their study was to examine the challenges and effectiveness of curriculum unit as implemented in a 4th, 5th grade general music classroom. Their pedagogy utilized doing it inquiry-based learning and was developed concurrently by a music educator, an ecologist, and a science educator across 4 schools in 2 different U.S. states. Over a 12-lesson unit focused on group composition, students learned to orally identify the musical elements, timbre, pitch, and duration, of various bird songs. Students were led through the following activities: realizing bird songs on different instruments, studying how birdsong functions in the environment, function as communication, exploring melodic ideas, texture and timbre, and deciding on a musical form for their compositions. Their research concluded that the birdsong group work allowed for improved student social engagement with solving problems. To sum up, using an interdisciplinary approach, a teacher recognizes knowledge issues and problems as connective between disciplines. Because of this, an interdisciplinary approach seems essential to eco-literate music pedagogy. Interdisciplinarity is fundamental to how people think, and music, connected to other disciplines, provides insight into ecological knowledge, issues, and problems. Music with a high IQ, subjectively estimated, can be selected to shed light on various ecological issues, while the concept of IQ drawn from Barrett and recycled from intelligent testing is to consider repertoire might, at its worst, become mechanistic. If IQ for ecological literacy remains subjective, teachers should be able to avoid some of the failings of the racist and classist use of intelligence quotients. The interdisciplinary IQ is not a hierarchical arrangement of students into a preset theory, the bell curve. Finally, interdisciplinary music learning can help improve student social engagement. While advantages of interdisciplinarity revealed, next I draw attention to one critical aim of music education: ecological literacy. David Orr's ecological literacy. Ecological literacy is an interdisciplinary praxis. The possibility of musicking to cultivate ecological literacy rests on 2 principles. 1, It is possible to learn to understand the ecological crises and creatively imagine and realize solutions. And 2, music contributes uniquely to human ecological thinking. The concepts of musicking, values, and culture intersect. Part of the problem of the ecological crises is cultural, and maybe all of it, which depends on the extent to which culture is distinguishable from other closely related concepts such as economy, history, technology, and religion. Discussing modern rootlessness, or suggests, quote, the enemy, rootlessness, and alienation of the modern world are part of our larger system of values, technologies, cultures, and institutions, which also produce acid rain, climate change, toxic waste, terrorism, and nuclear bombs, end quote. This is consistent with Simone Weil's treatise, The Need for Roots, and Illich's philosophy on soil, and it has been noted that music education reinforces this larger system of values. As Bates argues, quote, music curriculum integration ought to be down to earth, rooted in authentic, natural occurring as opposed to technologically constructed, complex, everyday musical practices and the immediate and long-term needs of children, end quote. Cultivating ecological literacy involves the formation of attitudes and involves directly experiencing nature, experiences that are rare in modern society generally, and schooling places specifically. One important aspect of David Ord's ecological literacy is his analysis of the ecological crises as plural. He identified 3 crises: the food crises, the fuel crises, and climate change. Each crisis involves many elements. And here's a longer quote. The first is a food crisis evident in 2 curves that intersect in the not too distant future, one showing worldwide soil loss of 24 billion tons. The other, a rapidly rising world population. The second crisis on the horizon is caused by the end of the era of cheap energy. We're at a race between the exhaustion of fossil fuels, global warming, and the transition to a new era based on efficiency and solar energy. The third crisis, perhaps best symbolized by the looming prospect of a global climate change, has to do with the ecological thresholds and limits of natural systems. We can no longer assume that nature will be either bountiful or stable, or that the earth will remain hospitable to civilization as we know it. These 3 crises feed upon each other, end quote. Intersecting with these 3 crises, more than 20 years since Orr's analysis, we might also consider crises connected to loss of species diversity, particularly the collapse of marine life due to overfishing, the continued loss of wilderness to development, for instance, rainforests in Brazil and in Louisiana, lack of apex predators in wilderness preserves, environmental toxins, PCBs, pesticides, phthalates, VOCs, dioxins, heavy metals, chlorine, negatively affecting human and non-human life, oil spills, overpopulation of non-native species, nuclear meltdowns, loss of potable water, and desertification of arid regions. Whether there are 3 or 30 ecological crises, the consequence of Orr's analysis is that the crises we face are plural. It is vital to cultivating ecological literacy. We live in an age where political discourse hardly makes room for one crisis, climate change. Climate change is certainly an important global crisis, and considered by itself, a glut of ways forward, none of which we seem to be attempting, can be introduced. But the realization that the ecological crises are plural demands we consider other crises when solving this one. For instance, some solutions involve increased production of plastics, which can exacerbate the waste crisis and increase our already untenable levels of e-waste production. This might add to the Great Pacific Garbage Patch and exacerbate the collapse of marine life. And ecologically literate citizenry will be crucial if effective solutions, both small and large scale, are to be imagined, enacted, and enforced in communities around the globe. These citizens understand global issues and know how to live well in their places. I have previously made this distinction between ecological consciousness involving living well in a local place, and ecological literacy, being able to understand the global crises. Thus, musicking experiences cultivating local ecological consciousness and helping to conceptualize global ecological literacy involve listening and respecting local places as well as asking deep questions about global crises. Deep questioning about the ecological crises is a central praxis of deep ecology, discussed more in Chapter 4, Deep Ecology. However, a little on respecting local places is appropriate here. Most often, modern people, who our educational systems educate, do not listen to local places. We rather prefer a universal, genderless, placeless consumer society that produces music as universalizables, especially those appropriated musics of distant places. Music teachers often enter schools with predetermined repertoire, and this act shows little respect for the human and non-human musicking in local places because it avoids tradition, bound in place, transforming people into interchangeable morsels of population ruled by the laws of scarcity. To re-invoke Illich. Musicers, for instance performers, composers, become scarce in industrial society, so that consuming becomes a manufactured need, in Illichian terminology, non-convivial, manufactured and marketed by music educators. Lifelong musicking, then, becomes a process of teaching students to become lifelong consumers, where in generations before music educators arrived, and in the social majorities around the world untouched by music education, everybody musicked, not for profit or fame, but in local places, sustainably. Ecological literacy in practice. What does it mean to individual music teachers, each in unique circumstances, to teach music for ecological literacy? For example, what does it mean for me to teach music for ecological literacy as a university lecturer? How do I balance the general spirit of this introductory course in Western music with reflection on us in the class as part of Western society, an expression of that society, as flawed, willful, individualistic, and career-oriented, as unsustainable, in short, occupied by what Western philosophy calls the human condition? How can I respect the students' selves as they currently understand themselves, while nudging them and myself to imagine their view of self might include unknown responsibilities for perpetuating the mindsets leading to the ecological crises? It is a difficult task to stare into the void and realize that some changes are easy and others are hard, but it is essential to see change as possible, that ecological literacy is, in practice, initially about self-change. Self-change begins with self-understanding, with respecting our personal histories and using the places we came from as a stable starting points, walking into the sustainable future. My own early life experiences growing up in a small, rural, central Pennsylvania town may have influenced my trajectory towards eco-literate music pedagogy. My grandfather was active in building both the town park and the nearby Prince Gallitzin State Park. As a child, I spent long hours in the woods, hunting and fishing, with my father and uncle, and later by myself. My father always kept 2 gardens, a backyard garden for food and a front yard flower garden around our statue of Mary. I helped him turn soil each year. These early experiences with nature led to my lifelong love of nature. It was only natural that, as an adult music educator, I would find eco-literate music pedagogy alluring, hoping to cultivate in my students a similar but unique to their own experience, appreciation for the musicking of nature. Interdisciplinary, self-reflective, place-based, constructivist. Ecological literacy practices are vital to multiple disciplines, including teachers scrutinizing the sustainability of their classrooms, are rooted in place, and involve constructing knowledge. A large body of scholarship uses David Orr's ecological literacy to understanding and learning. Taylor used art education to understand the problem of waste and sustainability. Brewer considered the use of schoolyards as laboratories to cultivate ecological literacy. Waters experimented with experimental play in natural environments, using found objects as artifacts to guide students to compose anthropomorphic narratives and to challenge their anthropocentric attitudes. Uncovering solutions to the ecological crises will involve interdisciplinarity, respect for traditional ways of thinking about how people and nature relate, self-reflection, and self-cultivation. Many researchers have noted the importance of early experiences to cultivating ecological consciousness, and the importance of place to that process, and ecological action. Douglas Forel Holmes explored his personal history and how his early memories of Scandinavian heritage led to his becoming an environmental educator. An early appreciation for Nordic mythology, which includes how people relate to nature, led to his appreciation of how traditional stories lead to wisdom and awareness of how to live ethically within a natural world. His autoethnography concluded that landscape influences culture and that, while students consider relationships between subjects that are often taught in isolation, each holds a key that together unlock the door to our future. One key will not open the door to a sustainable future for humankind. Ecological literacy is interdisciplinary, self-reflective, and critical, place-based, and constructivist. Holmes' autoethnography shows how early experiences and rooted mythology can lead to student interest. Living in an unsustainable consumerist society, students must be interested in the condition of nature if we hope they'll appreciate ecology and become passionate, sustainable citizens. This focus on interest and appreciation lead me back to all people benefit from musical engagement with nature. Musicking for ecological literacy. On a warm April morning, I walked through Tudeck Park in Pennsylvania, USA, with my 8-month-old son. We begin our walk, and the primary sounds we hear are those of children singing their joyous rhythmic songs of exciting singing and swinging on playground equipment, and sounds of playing soccer, children running and kicking the black and white ball into a small net. The pieces of play equipment have their own sounds, squeaking and swishing. There are also sounds of adults talking. A family has a reunion under pavilion's wall-less roof. Adult conversation and childish shouts intermingle. The rumble of cars and the singing of birds underlie these sounds, but are present nonetheless. My aim lies deeper in the park, since my child is too young to use the playground. As we walk down the hill, the sound of birds and squirrels become more prominent. While human sounds fade, dogs are barking further into the park, and we sit shoeless in the grass under the newly budding tulip tree, somewhat but not completely away from human sounds. Here, we listen to the music of the park, and I try to sing some of the sounds I hear, and my son also sings in a low monotone. We touch the dirt, grass, and the tree's trunk, branches and the buds emerging from the tree as we crawl on the ground and sing. It's possible that many people walking by would not call our songs music, though everybody, mostly dog walkers, stop to say hi to my son, and he sings back his low droning song, da, often crescendoing at the end for emphasis. The experience of nature's music is a learning experience for me and my son, where my aim is to cultivate ecological consciousness, feeling a sense of place of the environment, of non-human life, the ecology in which we live. Listening. In humility, people music together in complex interdisciplinary ways. All acts of musicking involve more than mere sound. In place, musicking can occur in sustainable ways to learn together about our ecology and to live together with human and non-human musicers. It seems easy and natural to enact eco-literate music pedagogy outside of schooling institutions, but can we, with our consumption-driven music education traditions, have experiences that parallel those some parents have with their children? Can we listen and music sustainably? Can we cultivate ecological literacy? It seems there is a path teachers might take. In this chapter, I considered the meaning of ecological literacy to eco-literate music pedagogy. An interdisciplinary approach to cultivate ecological literacy, rooted in place, was recommended. The next chapter will listen more deeply to what ecomusicology can add to eco-literate music pedagogy. Listen waiting. Connected, linking, joining, thinking, integrating, listen waiting. Nature thrums, hums, pulsating, beaks as drums, cicada trumpets jumping, playing, listen waiting. Disciplines descend through thought, children bringing what they brought, squirrels their heavy raucous dancing resonate and playful prancing, listen waiting, listen waiting. Writing, reading, science speeding, slowly dawdling, singing, modeling, novel ways of understanding nature's melodies and phrases, connected, linking, joining, thinking, integrating, listen waiting.